Welcome back to another episode of Beating Alpha. This is episode 139, and we have a very special guest on. Her name is Pauldine France. And no, she's not from France, as you will see, and you will get to know her a little bit better. 16-year-old years, commercial development and real estate strategist experience, having covering South Florida and New York markets. Currently, the vice president of the real estate Mana Group in Miami with a portfolio of over 70 assets. Pauldine, also a CEO of Neo Habitus, a disruption-driven business strategy consultancy that develops, manages, and executes the repositioning of branding, business development tactics, and high and best use concepts. And of course, for more information, you can go to the website that's called neohabitus.com and get in contact with her on a personal level, which is Instagram and LinkedIn. And those links are going to be down below, as always, for you to follow. But Pauldine, first of all, I just want to say a big thank you for joining me today on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you again. I'm happy that we connected and we can talk about some things that currently happen in your personal life and decisions that you're making to build the business, which is the consultancy. And I'm very excited to have you on today. So again, for the audience, can you talk about your personal background? I mean, where are you coming from, the things that you're currently working on as a vice president, and about your consultative business that you're building, a little bit more in detail.
Okay, well, there's a lot, so I'm going to try to make it as concise and short as possible. So I originally landed in commercial real estate about 16, 17 years ago because I needed a summer job. I was a State Department intern, actually, and all of my studies were in politics and global strategy. I wanted to be a political strategist. And having come out of my internship, where it was unpaid, I came back to Miami for a couple of months before going back, and I needed a job. It was just sheer luck. I applied to a couple of jobs as an assistant. I needed flexibility to still be able to study, so I needed flexible hours. And it happened to be for a developer that hired me. And what started off as is just a 3-month stint, I ended up not going back to complete my White House internship and falling in love in real estate and actually getting more and more involved in project management, construction, and development. And I've been stuck in it ever since then. I've worked in multiple parts, from the construction aspect of it, the planning aspect from it, the asset management, and among other things. And today I'm back in my mode of strategy, but real estate strategy. And the branding of product, and essentially taking something that might be average, just another building coming onto market, and making it stand out among the competition. And so I do that as vice president at 2 companies. And during the pandemic, I started my own consultancy just because the pandemic gave the opportunity for landlords that were sitting on a lot of property to sit back and say, I can't just sit on this anymore, and trying to come up with ideas and having to adjust existing well-planned ideas to this new world that we are essentially facing. As we've seen in recent years on the retail side, there have been many brands that have essentially just failed, just thrown in the towel. And it's not because something happened to their product. They remained consistent. It's not because there weren't enough buyers. What happens is you see a lot of the brands that have failed or shut down have 2 major flaws. Either one, they opened up too many locations. They just way over leveraged. They placed a heavy bet opening up 20, 30, 40, 50 stores a year, and then sitting on 400 and 500 stores without any preparation or hedging their position in case anything happened. No one could predict a pandemic, but we've had economic crises before. We've had issues of insecurity and instability, but many of these companies weren't prepared for that. On the second level, why there was so many failure is that so many that failed was you have these boards that oversee the operations of these companies. And the thing is, when you're looking at a company from black and white and paper, and you're looking at charts and graphs and projections, they're all pretty. They're based on hunches. They're based on what you see today and what you see yesterday. But what it doesn't include is the human value effect. It doesn't consider people's choices, changes in lifestyle, changes in income, changes in taste, potential competition, people stealing your ideas, in other words. So you've got brands like Chico, Aldo, Gap now just announced they're going to close basically at nearly every store. And you even have solid brands like Zara's that are looking to close some stores as well. Here in Miami, we've got 2 Apples that remained closed and they might not reopen. And those are Apple stores. So you have 2 opportunities that come in that. As a property owner, as a board, you can say, there are certain things brewing and I need to prepare. Unfortunately, you have a lot of these brands that I've mentioned that did not prepare. That is what I call, and what many call, being in the comfort zone. You're coasting, the shares, they went up by $1 or $2, your dividends are going out. You think everything's healthy, but you're not realizing that your consumer has now turned their attention somewhere else. And sometimes what makes the difference is just a logo change. It could be a tag change. It can be, okay, this brand used to sell a lot of this and that's what we're known for, but the new consumer is actually looking for that. So let's start introducing that in so that we remain relevant. And unfortunately, the gap between the boards and the decision maker and the consumer has widened in the last 3 to 5 years. And this is why COVID, essentially, although it's not a situation that lasted 10, 15 years, it's been actually under a year. These multi-billion-dollar companies that one would think should have more than enough money to cover themselves have essentially needed to give up and file for bankruptcy. So over leveraging and poor ideas, and that's essentially how Neo Habitus was born. Because at the other 2 firms where I'm vice president, my job is to keep my eyes open as to where things are trending, whether it's colors, style of names, even style of fonts make a difference. Yeah. You can look at a brand and it can give you a feeling as to whether it's new or whether it's old. And this applies in real estate where it comes to putting together your collateral, your offering memorandums, your leasing sheets, the name of the building, the social media, the digital advertising promo for the launch of the project, whether it's residential or commercial. All of that needs to take into account of who the customer is today, who is the next up and coming, and who's the one that's following that. Because whoever right now is 12 years old might be your tenant in your apartment building 10 years from now. Mm-hmm. So you've got to know, you've got to keep your eye on the 12-year-old, on the 22-year-old today, and the 45-year-old today, in order for you to build something and program something that will essentially last. So this is essentially what I do and how I got here today.
That is very great. I mean, that's a great story. And of course, that the personal journey continues from here, with the Neo Habitus. And again, you opened up my head to so many different questions that I want to ask. But first question that I wanted to ask again, how do you keep, your kind of eyes and ears open for the trendy things, as you mentioned, the colors, and I love the fact that you mentioned that companies should go full out into rebranding themselves, even changing the logo, the name, and adjusting that to what's currently happening in economy, which is, people and companies are very afraid of one thing, which is a change, So,
right.
So how do you actually go about and collect all these valuable pieces, as I mentioned, the colors, the fonts, like where do you find these things, and how do you look, around the corners to know what's going to be coming up and trendy in the future?
Well, what I recommend to people is to follow fashion. Fashion kind of leads the way in aesthetics, even furniture. new design furniture or new color schemes actually flow out of apparel.
Yeah.
And consumers that buy a certain type of color or go to a certain type of brand because the logo is a certain way or that's attracting them, paying attention to those trends is very important to apply for yourself. Because in real estate, we are very marketing heavy. Whether it's brokerage and your leasing signs, your banners, your window clings, your e-newsletters, whatever it is, or as a landlord or developer, these trends are very important to pay attention to and to be applied, even down to rendering a condo, right? You're going to render a condo or create a showroom space to sell a pre-construction development. But then you render it or design it in a style that is kind of 15 years ago, still very nice, but the new consumer doesn't live that way anymore. You've now missed the mark. So following fashion trends, which if you are in commercial real estate and you do leasing, particularly retail leasing, it's not that hard. And part of my role is merchandising. So keeping an eye out on who the next brands are that are actually signing leases is part of my job. So I have to say it's a little easier for me because I'm constantly speaking to retailers and companies anyway, from banks to restaurants to clothing stores, services, and so on and so forth. And so I get to see, wow, this gym opened up on this block and that other gym opened 4 blocks away. This one's doing a lot better because of X. And it takes some training because we all have some level of bias that we put into something, like our own preferences. Personally, having spent years working in New York, I still have a New York aesthetic. This is, for example, a lot of color for me. And all it is a pop of red. But that's because I now live in Miami. Otherwise, normally, I'm usually in black. I spend my days looking like someone that's going to a funeral. It's just my comfort zone. My own home is all neutral colors. Right now, I'm in my office and I've added a little bit more life to the background, but I'm all grays and neutral browns at home. That's not what the new generation really is looking at right now. They're captivated by pops of color, by light, by energy.
Yeah.
And that's the information I essentially collect from a visual standpoint and from conversations. Then, of course, we've got lots of market trend reports. CoStar has a plethora of information. I always advise people to sign up to some good, viable newsletters as well. CBRE has a great newsletter that updates on retail and new development, new areas coming in. And the ICSC has its own publication among some other organizations. So it's research, research, research. This business is not one of those businesses where you can just coast and rely on people who work next to you to just feed you information. Each person at every level has to constantly be eager to add more information and move as much bias out of the way and say, all right, I can't think as me. I need to think as the next person and speak to people within that age range as well. And I think that's something that lacks a lot in real estate. We see most of these real estate groups are significantly older people, and some of them have been smart enough to bring in their sons and daughters and nephews into the business. But there's still an issue of almost reverse ageism in our business, where the young ones are kept in the marketing department, or hey, keep just updating our Instagram, versus taking those people, putting them into a conference room and saying, listen, would you live here? Would you shop here? Is this an experience that you think is cool? Will this last, or does this feel old? There isn't enough of that going on. So that's the way I do it. That's how I recommend for my clients to do it as well, and my employers.
Got it. Yeah, and I love the fact that you mentioned again about the colors, because the young kind of trendy people, the younger generation are looking at the colors, and people like the companies should adapt to that, add more maybe color to their personal branding and logos, but at the same time coming back to what's happening, and people and companies are afraid of change, and they using that kind of gray color, which is, like the classic color would never go away, like
Right.
classic, same as fashion, like classic is always going to be around. And, like you
Right.
just always stay there, you're always going to be dressed as classic because, it will come out at some point, and
Right.
you're always gonna say the same. But coming back to the question, is there some way that you can actually go and look behind the corner and kind of see what's going to be coming up? Because as you mentioned, if you're going to follow the fashion trends, to see like what type of clothing are people buying in the shop, what colors is going to be, because we're going to be adapting to what's already happened in the marketplace with our marketing strategy, which is kind of too late. But how do we go ahead, and see before that happens in the shops? Is there so many ways for us to be the kind of pioneers in the beginning stages?
Well, even in apparel, trends are released several months and sometimes a year in advance. So there's plenty of time to adapt. For example, you can have a classic brand that the logo is just navy blue and white. There's nothing wrong with that. Where you create the change and where you adjust is in your messaging. Okay? You can make navy blue and white as boring and dry and seasonless as you possibly can. You really can. You can have a brochure with two people shaking hands in a suit, with everyone posing like this. We've seen this,
Many
okay?
times.
Or you can take that same navy blue and white and create quarterly marketing campaigns through your e-newsletter, through your updating your homepage, through your blog, through your digital advertising, through your Instagram page, and really incorporate it and make it cool. You can tie it into oceanography images or glass that goes in very corporate buildings, tend to have a bluish tint. Use that. There are so many ways and you can take accent colors. You can one season use imagery with the navy blue and white that includes yellow and red. Another season, it can be green and white, green and beige combined with there's so many ways to work with that. And that's where having a regular communication with your marketing team and keeping that team fresh is very, very important. So no one needs to go out and change their black and white logo to neon pink and yellow. No one's asking to do that. But if you are very sign heavy, like in brokerage, and you're in a neighborhood where every other sign is also navy blue and gray, navy blue and white, navy blue and something, and you want for your sign to stand out, maybe it's not a bad idea to still keep the logo, minimize the logo, but you can make the sign an entirely different color. Your brand doesn't have to be, your brand colors doesn't have to necessarily always be the first thing everybody sees. That's my point. It can always be there on the side. The main color could be incorporated in the overall image, but you can actually create something that's far more striking that when people pass by, they're like, I saw that sign down the block. And that's the one they remember. That's the one they take the picture of. So there are many ways to look at it. To answer your question directly, the easiest answer to be say, oh, log on to XYZ or call this company to get the answer. No, unfortunately, it's not so easy. It really, like everything, requires research and gut instinct.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Love it.
really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yes, of course. So yeah, doing a lot of research, and again, through your personal experience, you're kind of looking to adjust and make your own, well-educated decisions based on your personal experience. That's exactly what the companies are doing. So, so talking about, and again, I love the fact that you're putting a lot of emphasis into the color coding and the color and the different colors and the palettes and the way your logo looks like and the letters and everything, because that seems like for some people it seems like kind of boring thing. Is like, why should I pay attention to my logo and the colors? Does that even matter? Because it's one of the things that people, when we look at that as a sign, and probably many of you, passed many signs maybe today if you went for a walk or just drove with the car, but some signs stood out for some reason. Again, it's kind of a little bit more unconscious thing. And again, that's what you do. Like you're touching the kind of unconscious that people don't, notice most of the time, but they're unconscious, and that's where it's going to register.
Right.
And that's where you go in and call that company for whatever reason it popped in your head. It's
Right.
because of that kind of unconscious thing. So
Correct. And to add, actually, to
sure.
also add, it's not just on signs and logos and colors, it's also how it's incorporated in your office. When someone walks in, how modern it feels. What is your brand reflecting? Is it reflecting traditionalism? Is that what your office is reflecting? Is it cohesive? If you're pushing out a bunch of stuff that's modern and cutting edge, and your office doesn't feel that way, your team isn't so inspired because they're not in an environment to feed the modern concept. But two, your consumer client that comes into the office also isn't attaching the brand to the vibe. So the story of who you are and what you represent goes through to everything. Again, even down to naming buildings and shopping centers.
Yeah.
It goes to it goes that far.
Exactly.
No one's really trying to live in a building called the Betsy anymore. You know what I mean? There was a time buildings were people's names, the George, the this, the Betsy, that played out. So all of those go into basically building the right team and having different types of people represented in that team for it to be diversified and to reflect what the world is looking like more, and listening to those things. That's really what it comes down to. And all the ideas of colors, fonts, and so on and so forth, they come together. And then to that same team, you say, okay, we've got option A, B, C, and D. Which one feels good? And that's how decisions are made. The singular chairman that says, I like this, that's a gamble. Because that chairman usually has no idea how the consumer is living or what their interests are.
Yeah, exactly. And first of all, they don't think it's important for them, for their personal business, because it says on a sign, it says established 1925, and they're running their business just based on that.
Right.
That's what's going to keep us there, because like we're established 100+ years ago, and everything is going to be great for us. But look, like, and that's why they pushing on the marketing. When marketing people come in and it's like, oh, what do you think about the colors, about the branding? Yeah, that's fine, just go with it. Because look, it's not the thing that they do. And as you said, maybe they're a CEO, maybe they're vice president, or a different position, but they're not marketing people. And they need people just like yourself who come in and reshape, rebrand the companies. Because during times like these with the COVID, everything, people need to rebrand and reshape. Because you see yourself, Pauldine, I'm sure you've seen yourself, the companies who I mentioned, 1925, gone like overnight.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, they feel old and archaic. I mean, even there was a time even lawyers and architects and accountants, that's what people gravitated towards. They liked that old establishment, mahogany desk, old, cognac colored chair. You're seeing that change also, where you have some of the bigger firms that are modernizing their office. They're using more tech. They're getting used to using DocuSign, for example, versus printing out 50 different pages that someone has to flip through. There's evolution, and people like convenience. People like that type of evolution, to feel that, all right, this company definitely sees what I see. I can relate at least to what they're saying and what they're doing. So if your business only depends on the same clients that you've had for years, then don't do anything at all. But if your business requires growth, then you have to do these types of adjustments and constantly reassessing, like, hey, should we have a new message coming out, or should we stick to that? Like, what's going on? And that also ties into another aspect of real estate, which is merchandising, right? Programming a building, a mall, a shopping center, a block. What tenants go next to what's interesting, what's not interesting, what's going to draw people in, and what's going to remain consistent. Okay. The world of, well, they can pay rent, we'll just take them. That's just not going to work anymore, because people actually don't want to bounce around to different places. They want to go to places and get everything that they need, whether it's services or whether it's what they want to buy. And looking at that from a perspective of neighborhood, you have in some cases, and I see that even in Miami, some developers that are all coming up with the same ideas. Each one of them want to bring in 10 coffee shops. So you're going to have a neighborhood of coffee shops. Oh no, but they're going to be organic. Okay, well, they're all organic, kind of rustic coffee shops. How many customers you have that are going to need 30 coffee shops in a 1 mile radius? And then you still have to compete against Starbucks, right? That kind of, you're diluting everyone's business. And then you've got some neighborhoods that need certain things and no one's targeting that. So there's the brand aspect, which is your visuals. And then there's your use aspect, which is your programming. It's the way people are living. What are people looking for today? Are they looking for the mega super center supermarkets in your area? Or are they looking for things that feel more neighborhood-y? You know, are they looking for gourmet, or are they looking for quick, easy, grab and go because it's a heavy corporate work area? And those are certain things that now, again, due to COVID and people seeing that many of their tenants weren't even doing that well before, are now having to leave. They're having to readdress that. Okay, we need to look at tenants that people in this neighborhood actually want to go to regularly. My neighborhood doesn't have a dry cleaner, for example. I'm right now in talks to bring one in. How is it that I'm surrounded by high-rise buildings, tons of top developers have built, and no one has insisted this neighborhood doesn't have a dry cleaner? We need to get one in because they're going to make great money. They're going to stay here, and our tenants are going to be happy that they don't have to drive to another neighborhood to drop off their dry cleaning and pick it up. Simple things like that. But all of that has to do with creative strategy.
Got it.
You know, building a building, the design part is creative, and then you build it.
Yeah.
But then you got to sell it and you've got to merchandise it. And those are two things that require a lot of research, again, and lots of creativity.
Yeah. And that's exactly what you do with the consulting business. You know, it's for those type of people who are saying, look, first of all, like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. And maybe first thing is like, should I change? You know, that's still a lot of people that come through, you know, personally to me, or I go on a podcast and talk myself. People ask me like, you know, what do you think about social media? Should I use it? I come across these people. I'm like, man, it's been around long enough. So if you're still like asking these questions, it's like going, you know, to the car dealership and thinking, maybe I should still ride a horse, you know, like, so.
Right, exactly.
I mean,
it's the weirdest.
It's very weird. And those people are, sophisticated business people, and they're still asking those kind of, you know, very interesting questions, because again, it's not their nature of the business. They're operating the business. They're looking at the numbers at the spreadsheet at the bottom line, and they're looking to, you know, provide the good returns for the company, for the investors. And I do understand that. So, and that's why they need people just like yourself who can reshape the company, taking from the pens, from the clothing, cars, vans, buildings, everything, you know, and making a brand for them. So, but let's say, you know, let's get specific. Let's say with real estate companies, you mentioned, and you said you went through a lot of OMs, operating memorandums, and it was kind of, everybody's kind of the same, offering the same thing. It pictures the same, everything's the same. So let's say for the real estate business, let's say it's a development business, like how should they brand and market themselves to make sure that they stand out from the rest of the builders out there?
Well, essentially, I answered that earlier, which is, you know, following what people are actually looking for. The thing, as far as I go, that has me put a lot of OMs aside, or not even look at it immediately because my eyes get tired, is the use of really monochromatic, uninteresting color patterns. When you spend hours in front of a computer and at your desk, and you're sent 6, 7 different OMs to look through, for consideration in order to buy or to JV with. And in my case, many times, I have to sort out what seems like junk and what seems potential based on the neighborhood it's in, the numbers, this and that, and run it through our own in-house asset management and underwriters to see if it really, really makes sense. The one thing that keeps me from focusing on it sometimes is just the drabness, or I would say the number one negative is small font. The tiniest of font, and I've got 20/20 vision, the smallest of font, and so many, it's so paragraph heavy. Listen, it's an offering memorandum. Can't even speak English now. My frustration is coming out of these OM creators. Let me tell you, I do not want to read 50 different paragraphs of how you feel the building and the project's going to be great. I want the plan, the site map, the renderings, the numbers. I want bullet pointed highlights. I don't need to have a long paragraph about how the river that flows by it flows south and gives a serene peace to the project and an ecosystem of a yada, yada, and yada, yada. No one reads that.
And then you end up somewhere on a Jupiter, it just goes from
it goes all over the place. Before I can get to the numbers, I'm like, this project is boring as hell. And if it's a partnership proposal or an equity request, I think about, I'm like, oh my God, dealing with these people are going to be so boring. There's some information that needs to be said, and there's some information that needs to be said. When it comes to the highlights of the developer, if it's a developer that is pitching itself for a JV deal or whatever, yes, there needs to be a little bit more background information. But at the end of the day, you need to sell the deal. If the deal sells visually and on paper at first glance, then all that extra information of all the details of how the birds fly through the neighborhood and how there are 58 schools, we can talk about that later. Just highlight the key things that'll make it sell. You also find when brokerages do OMs, they dedicate a significant amount of paragraphs on themselves. And I always find that useless. I mean, especially if you're from a company that most people recognize. If you're a team out of Coldwell Banker, I don't need 4 paragraphs of your team, because at the end of the day, you're sending me an OM.
Yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to say something. I think they're kind of using this old, little bit outdated strategy because they think it's going to build them credibility, for the personal business.
Right. Whereas at the end of the day, right now with the digital world that we live in, we are swarmed with emails. And it's not just emails into your inbox. We all have multiple emails now. And then we've got our LinkedIn accounts with those direct messages. And if you have any type of promotional strategy on social media, people are writing you there as well. And they're your in-person conversations. So there's so many things being offered to us, so many deals, so many conversations, so many brokerages, so many developers, so much that you don't have the 15, 20 minutes that people had 40 years ago to pay attention to whatever you're sending them. Mm-hmm. It just doesn't exist anymore. Right now, you have a couple of seconds for someone to say, let me flip it, or let me swipe to see the next page. If you can't capture the person off of that first swipe to keep swiping, you're going to get the swipe. Okay, anyway, move it aside. And maybe if you're lucky and I'm bored and I have a 12-hour flight, I might take it with me to read because I might be bored. But chances are, big chance it goes into the garbage. And then what it's going to end up is you're going to have to keep on following up with me. I keep forgetting I had it. And all of that reduces the chance of captivating your audience. And that's the old school way that people are not adjusting to. Your picture like this in a suit doesn't need to be on the first page.
Yeah.
I've seen OMs like that where I see the title of the project and it's got some kind of disclaimer. And the first thing I see when I open are the brokers, the brokerage, their history. No, that's not what I opened it for.
Yeah,
I'll see that in the back.
So again, it depends on the nature of the business, because, you know, that type of strategy where you don't have to look like super professional, and of course, like personally looking from what's happening, let's say on Instagram and on social media, the trendy thing right now is actually where you being yourself instead of, again, being on the suit, having the photo shoot, everything is perfect and lined, and there's, you know, photographer who said, you know, look this way, look at the camera from that angle. Instead of doing that, you're just doing kind of whatever. Look, there's background, there's kids running around, and, you know, I'm just being me. And that's a trendy thing right now, like what's happening with the TikTok, a lot of people doing that stuff, and Instagram and like LinkedIn. So people being themselves, and that's a trendy thing. And I think it could stay for a little bit, because people are sick and tired of seeing that kind of super professional, you know,
manufactured.
Correct. But at the same time, there's companies just like Blackstone who I think they cannot, you know, start posting content like this that will be like kind of, you know, because they have to keep certain standards for the company, because that's the way it goes. But
well, their target is different.
Yeah.
They're not targeting they're not targeting a younger consumer. Yeah, they're not an apartment building. They're not a shopping center. They're not a strip center. They're not a mall. Okay. Just like if you are in the warehouse development business, you don't need to be that cool, but you still have to be aware that, you know, your black and white marketing sheet is not as interesting as the next person that is showing a community of people in warehouses that are collaborating with each other, that feel, for example, warehouses, people tend to look at safety or security of their merchandise, highlighting the things that people are actually looking for. Okay. So that, depending on what business you are, you have to understand the story, the pitch. But the story and pitch before used to come from the owner. Okay. And that's the history of it and the yada yada of it. But now, in order to get people to walk in through your door, and that could be your virtual door or your actual physical door, that's a different vibe. They don't want to hear about how old you are. Yeah. And how hundreds of years old, and walk into a space that feels drab old, and then having to go through a bunch of paperwork, whereas they can see it digitally or get it by email or have a visual call. Things are changing. And if a company, nearly any company, is looking to evolve and grow their base, they need to be able to evolve. And Blackstone themselves have evolved in their own way. Oh, yeah. They also hire many young people to help them with that constant evolution. Yeah. There's a lot of young millionaires who are becoming like, and those people are looking to invest into what Blackstone has to offer. So they have to attract that type of audience with the right marketing message and approach, of course. Right. But Blackstone's brochure today does not look like Blackstone's brochure from 10 years ago. Yeah. It's way more clean, way more modern. I think with the brochures, like the thing that we're seeing, and that's why it's so much in detail, and like going from the apartment, from the units, from the couches to the rivers and the Jupiter, is because, you know, it's supposed to be that thick for one reason, because it's supposed to make it look difficult, because, you know, like real estate, it's something that it's for the rich people. It's for the people who go into these, you know, kind of exclusive places, and where you used to go and exchange, you know, the deals when you used to go play golf. And now it's getting exposed more to the public, and, you know, but still the same approach stays, which of course it will convert. It will go to the digital side, as you said, because, you know, there's more actually people coming through the doors on the digital media, you know, sites before they actually go and knock on your physical doors. And again, because of the people just like yourself, they will start to see that they need to make a shift, because, I mean, it's already happening. So it's two approaches. You either move on with the times, or you're gonna left behind. So Most people check a website, as you just said perfectly. Most people check a website before they walk in through a physical door.
Yeah.
For anything, whether it's your dentist, whether it's to buy a condo, buy a house, everyone's going online as their first reference, even much older people, because it's in your hand now. Oh, you should go see so-and-so, you know, this restaurant. What do? We go online. We want to see the location. We want to look at the reviews. We want to look at pictures inside. All of those things are things that people need to be paying attention to, banks included. You see so many changes happening with Citibank and Wells Fargo. Why are they making those changes? Why are there commercials showing younger people? Why are they trying to look cooler? Because they need more bank accounts to open. They need more people to open savings accounts. They need more people to open up investments accounts. And where is that new money coming from? They're coming from the yuppies, the ones that just got the middle management job and they're getting paid well. And they're now in a situation of a double income household. They want to buy their own home or start their own business. This new generation, for example, is highly entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And that's something to also keep in mind, which bodes well for people in the office business, by the way, and warehousing. But these are things to keep in mind. And if you see a company as old as a Citibank or Wells Fargo making that adjustment, so know that every other company also needs to be doing the same. It's that simple. So you said that correctly.
Yeah. I mean, if you take an example and see what Amazon did, when Amazon started selling, you know, the books, the CDs, and then they, you know, kind of diversified their products into different things, now selling like hundreds of thousands of different products. Everybody was thinking about, well, my God, why should I buy a book like from online, like store, when it can go on all these, you know, bookstores? And now they completely changed everything because they were pioneers. They looked again behind the corner, you know? So that if we want to be like those type of people, you should definitely listen to Pauldine advice and get in contact with her, because again, like all the details for that is going to be down below. And again, you should go to the website. It's called newhabiters.com, because it's a very long conversation if you want to go in depth and kind of uncover the strategies, the tips, the everything, because there's a lot of different details. And as you find out so far, guys and girls. But before we go, one thing that I wanted to ask you, if you shared this episode with a friend of yours, best case scenario, if he owns a real estate business and he's looking to reshape his personal brand and a message and approach in the marketplace, this is a great episode to send for him or her. But Pauldine, I just want to say a big thank you again for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this episode.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys. So again, guys, make sure to pass this episode along. And as always, I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.